Hello and welcome to this edition of The Interview. Today, my guest is Fadi Dayoub. Hello and welcome. You are the Executive Director of the Local Development and Small Project Support. You are based in Turkey and you are a guest today. Can you first explain what exactly your organization does? You work in Syria, of course.
We work in Syria. We work in the areas that are not controlled by the Syrian regime. Our mission is to help the local society, the local organizations, civil society organizations and local councils to structure their action, to be able to represent, to advocate and to serve the local community they are in. So our support is basically try to find funding sources for them to make them be able to operate, but also help them to build their capacity, increase their efficiency, increase their coordination, local coordination in order to have a better service to the people. We also work on the inclusiveness of these structures of the people that are in the communities. We insist a lot on the participation of the community in the action of these structures. The whole principle of our action is to create democracy from the bottom up and then to create at a local level the best notion of citizenship actually that is possible to be implemented under the conditions that we are operating in.
So basically you're reorganizing these communities once they're no longer being organized by Bashar al-Assad, this regime, but it's also there's also a sense that you need to, in a sense, fight the influence of Islamist groups. Is that correct?
It's correct. We are not reorganizing. The communities are reorganizing themselves. Our role is to help them to do that. And it is true, one of the major challenges that we do have is that this temptation of some armed groups to take over or to control the local public or civil life, sometimes by necessity, sometimes by just temptation of power. And one of the battles that we have also with the local community is to push back. To push back against this pressure and to make sure that the armed groups understand their role as, fighting the regime and not influencing the public life, the local public life. Boundaries will depend on the area. But overall, what we can see is that actually with the communities, these boundaries are flexible and they need somebody to fight for them to actually move in the sense of opening more space for the local communities to feel more free and to have more civil action.
And how do you do that? Because, obviously right now in a lot of these areas, the Islamic armed groups are going to have the most military equipment. They're going to be the strongest military power around. How do you impose anything on them at the end of the day as to how the places are run?
Well, the best strategy we found is that actually most of these armed groups are in a way related to the local community. They are, for most of their fighters, people from the areas that they operate in. And if you can have these communities actually fight for their rights in a way, then it's very, very hard for the local armed groups to fight against their own people. So the best strategy for us was to work with the community and make them understand the necessity for them to have their freedom, the necessity for them to organize their civil work. And it has worked. Most of the time, most of the confrontations we had did not rise to the level of threatening the lives of people. Yes, we did have some difficulties. Our teams on the ground that had some difficulties. Some of our friends were even kidnapped. But at the end of the day, it's actually believe in the community, believe in the Syrian people, believe in the values that you have, and make them carried by the people, and then they will defend you, and then they will defend these values, and then they will be able to increase the margin of freedom.
So you used to operate in Eastern Ghouta?
Yes.
But that no longer is the case since the regime has retaken the Eastern Ghouta.
Yes.
Where you're operating now, what is left of of this area, this rebel-held area where you operate? What's left of it right now?
Okay, I don't like to talk in terms of what is left. Our decision to expand outside of Eastern Ghouta was not related to the fact that we felt that Eastern Ghouta was threatened. We started operating in other areas before because we do have a kind of operating model that we think is useful for all the areas that are outside of the control of the regime, and we do have a kind of expansion plan to all the other areas. So we had started already working in Western Aleppo countryside at the beginning of 2017, beginning 2018, Northern Aleppo countryside, and 3 or 4 months ago we started working in the south, the southeast, in the Western Daraa countryside. And what is left? I mean, quite a bit of space. Even if we consider that, you know, southwest is still not clear what's going to happen. But if you look at the areas in the north, when we talk about northern part of Hama, a part of Idlib, and then big parts of Aleppo, not to mention all the parts that are actually on the east, just the parts that are west of the Euphrates, this is an area that is as big as Lebanon as a country, and it has 3 to 4 million people. So what is left is by itself huge.
Oh, of course. But what I mean is that right now, as we know, Daraa is, you know, in the process for the time being of being, you know, retaken by the regime, or it's under assault by the regime, and it seems that there's been negotiations so that, you know, fighters in that area are leaving by themselves rather, you know, to avoid what happened in the Ghouta.
Yes.
What do you think is going to happen? I mean, Daraa will probably be reconquered soon, no? Or is there any other possible outcome?
I don't know, actually. That we have to leave to the, you know, will of the powers, I would say, the Russian-American agreement and the Jordanian influence. So I don't want to speculate about something I don't know, actually. I don't know. We will deal with the situation when it happens, and actually we'll reconsider everything each time we do that. What we know is, as long as there are areas that are not controlled by the regime, there is a space for us to operate. And then we do feel the need, as long as the people feel the need, to be constructing a model where the regime is not there, but where people can continue their lives and actually have a better life, then we think that our job is still ongoing. And the day that people inside of Syria decide that it's done, then our action is done.
But you've been an activist ever since the beginning of this war in Syria. You were talking about the powers. It does appear that most of you know, Western powers, I mean, for example, if we take a concrete example, it's a very recent one, which I know concerns you directly, is the fact that France, for example, has decided to deliver aid through the Russians to the Syrian population. How do you feel about that? It does appear that the West has kind of dropped this Syrian cause, hasn't it?
It feels like it, yeah, sure. I mean, and we will probably not be the first ones. I remind everyone what happened during the Spanish War. So it will not be the first time that the West actually kind of drops its values and decides on a pragmatic business deals with other powers. And I would not say we are surprised. Don't take us for naive people who actually just, you know, believed everything that was told by the Western powers. However, you know, there is one thing that actually everybody forgets in these kind of arrangements. There is something that's called the Syrian people and the will of the Syrian people. So yeah, you might find arrangements that would actually work temporarily. Yes, that the Syrian people has been in such a state now of weakness because of all what happened. It might be silent for a while. However, I do believe in my people, and I do believe at the end it's our will that's gonna win. It's the will of the people. Now, regarding the French, I was, you know, talking because we are supported by the French Foreign Ministry, and they said that it's not a change of policy. It's just an opportunity they want to try to see if there is a way to continue to support the inhabitants of the Eastern Ghouta, which used to be through people like us when it was not under the control of the regime. And they do not really trust the UN, apparently, to do that mission. So they were exploring other methods.
But it
makes me sad a little bit, because I do know how the Russians think and how the regime thinks, and it's probably a little bit naive to think this kind of experimentation will have no propaganda.
But don't you have the feeling that, in a sense, it's an endorsement of the Russian victory in the Ghouta to actually go through them in order to? I mean, it's very difficult to analyze it any other way, right?
Well, I'm not very good at analysis. I'll let you do that. But it feels like it has not been studied thoroughly, and the impact, I mean, I would say communication and propaganda impact was not really measured at the right level. It looks like a naive move. I would like to think it as a naive and not as a change of policy. I did get the confirmation that it was not. However, you know, the truth is in the facts and the deeds and not in the words. We will see.
Well, thank you very much for speaking to us. Thank you very much for watching this program. Obviously, you can watch it again on france24.com. And, well, speak to you soon for another show.
Maracaibo has all the symptoms of a failed economy in an ailing country. Oil facilities are abandoned, leaking pipelines poison the local fishermen's catch. Famine is spreading. A full tank of petrol costs little, but buying a loaf of bread costs a fortune. 2 million people have already fled the country. Our reporters spoke to people struggling to survive and families risking it all by joining Colombia's traffickers.
500,000 pesos, que en 20 meses de trabajo allá no me los gano. Y en un día aquí los tengo.
Watch our special report on Venezuela's downward spiral as oil hopes fail to deliver.
Our special correspondents are the real eyewitnesses of the news. Join me for reporters.